Hey everybody, it's Bob Crossan, Senior Managing Editor for Water and Waste Digest. Today I have with me Rajan Ray. He is Global Strategy Lead of Digital Solutions for CDM Smith. He and a co-author penned an article in our May issue about some emerging technologies that engineers are using to better do their jobs. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what those technologies are and how they're impacting the work that he and his teams have been doing. So Raj, thanks so much for being on the call. We appreciate you taking the time today.
No, thanks, Bob. It's good to be on this call and appreciate kind of all the kind of good things, good articles that you guys are producing. So, no, thanks.
Yeah, and we've seen some of these changes over the years. I think this is probably the second article that I've published for WWD about kind of these emerging technologies in the engineering side of things. A lot of times we're so focused on the technologies of treatment and what's happening at the plant, but there's a lot of technology that's happening from the engineering side and making your jobs easier. Could you talk about kind of that changing and evolving landscape there? And the types of technology that is out there now that is influencing the way that you're engineering and designing these systems.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like in a few words, kind of everything is evolving to digital. I think we wrote in um, the article, like utilities are collecting more data than ever before, something like 2.65 quintillion bytes of data each day, which I have no idea what that number is, but it certainly sounds like a lot, right? Um, but there's a ton of um, data and data streams, but there's still that existing problem that's been there for the longest time, and you could probably talk to any utility about it. Is that there's still a communications and collaboration challenge, and a lot of that, it affects not only the utility in terms of their daily operations and planning, but also interactions with consulting firms. If you look at any project timeline schedule, waiting for data interactions, data processing, all that is time, which equates to money, which equates to more billable hours, to longer project cycles, et cetera, et cetera. And so the more we could do refining that and kind of providing more value with those data streams, the better. So that would be kind of it in the short. I mean, coupled with there is certainly a trend and kind of a new generation of kind of more digital savvy operators and engineers that are kind of joining the forces in both utilities and engineering firms. And then there's a wave of folks in the next, 2 to 5 years or so of people leaving that have a lot of that information on systems and processes. And so the timing's kind of right for doing things smarter and better with just digital technology and solutions. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, do you see the same thing with some of the kind of leaders and experts you talk to?
Oh yeah, for sure. This whole digital transformation stuff and the acceleration on that front in terms of data, like you talked about, is something that I've been hearing about for many years. And I think last year, especially with the pandemic, there's a much greater acceleration towards a lot of these systems, especially in terms of like remote access to that data. Just because of the nature of trying to comply with social distancing and pandemic guidelines and stuff like that, a lot of utilities were gravitating toward those programs so that they could accomplish their work without compromising on those guidelines and whatnot. I wanted to talk too about kind of like from that engineering side, some of the things that were mentioned in the article, like HoloLens and VR and that kind of a thing. Like how are those things being used from like the design aspect? Because my understanding is that it allows you to kind of basically create the CAD of the thing that you're building and have someone like actually walk through it without even being there.
Exactly. And I mean, and so you mentioned a couple of things. So one is how the pandemic really was like a little bit of a force multiplier to get that technology evolved and in use. So example, we're working on a treatment plant in the Middle East, and with the travel restrictions, we're like, what are we going to do? We still have a project; they still need to get this done. Um, and so the use of HoloLens and some of that technology, that extended reality technology, was like paramount to getting that project rolling and doing that. So, but yeah, exactly what you said is kind of being able to design and actually see before they're actually in the ground or in the facility, but to see how they could work and to model it prior to see where you need to position machinery and get things in place to actually continue with the design and build is huge. I mean, it's a big shift and a positive shift, in my opinion, of really being more efficient with projects, especially projects where there's a geographical distance between the consultant and the client.
Hmm. Yeah, I wanted to ask you like which of these seems is most exciting to you. I mean from my personal feeling like seeing that HoloLens stuff and like because I know from an engineering side of it, part of it is certainly making sure the system operates properly, but the other part is like is this railing in the right spot? Like, can we even access to do the maintenance that we need to do in this space? And I would imagine that having that kind of HoloLens thing for something that's so geographically far away that you can still interact with is a massive, massive help in those even those tiny small details that you also need to get right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right. So that, coupled with that kind of the digital twin technology, so not only just buildings, but in collection systems, water distribution systems, being able to actually model and plan proactively by seeing where things are and kind of who's involved and actually how it integrates with project schedules and personnel is a big deal for sure.
Hmm. Yeah. So in terms of like usage of these technologies, you mentioned this project that you guys had done kind of in the Middle East, and you use these systems to keep that running through the pandemic. What are some other ways that CDM Smith has leveraged technology like this to make its work possible,
Mm-hmm.
or to enhance it if it's that way?
Yeah, so I'll speak to you a bit more of some of the digital kind of innovations because I think that I mean, there's definitely the communications and collaboration standpoint it's kind of a need and required in most of all, probably all places, right, to improve that. And so those types of extended reality and HoloLens and even just, I mean, as basic as cloud computing, as the baseline, and just making things simple. That's there. But like in terms of some of the digital technologies that's exciting that we're kind of working on, it's all about kind of capitalizing on data investments that our clients and utilities are already using. So, for example, we're doing some work in Hawaii to optimize the client's data for risk-based prioritization. And then we're going to combine that with the latest in satellite image processing and AI to identify replacement candidates according to like the leakage potential from the satellite imagery. So that's pretty exciting. The lead and copper rule, as you know, is a big deal. And there's a lot of resources and investments going into it. But we did a project with City of Newark in New Jersey, and we shortened the time frame of the service line replacement from 10 years to 2.5 years just by being a little bit smarter with construction management and using GIS and that type of technology, having dashboards and field data and devices all kind of talking in synchronous and getting things done just so much more efficiently and really with those key performance indicators kind of front and center to really cut down that time frame. So the visualization I think is a big deal. Not just dashboarding, but visualization and actually establishing some actions from those software tools is kind of where we see CDM Smith for sure going and the industry going.
Hmm.
but yeah, I mean, it ran like, and then if you talk about the other parts of engineering, there's the electric vehicle side of planning and strategizing where those should be. And so we did a big project with Los Angeles um, World Airports and a 15-year kind of strategic planning of kind of it's exactly that, just nailing down the electric vehicle planning for that organization.
Very
Um,
interesting.
yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, so we're like that. That's it's the timing's right to just do really neat things. Like as you mentioned, like COVID forced a lot of people to work remotely, do things off of with a streamlined workforce, as well as not the ability to go to people's houses and collect data as they used to. So it changed a lot of the mindset, which is I think is the sometimes the biggest change that needs to happen before technology gets adopted. And so that mind shift and kind of culture and behavior change forced by the pandemic really helped us promote like things like we just investing a lot of with an R&D with machine learning and artificial intelligence with for example looking at sewer lines and kind of classifying defects on an automated fashion and more standardized fashion with that. Facilities, so another part of like plants and facilities of looking at energy costs and reducing greenhouse gases. So using that type of technology of data processing, AI, and machine learning to cut down on those energies and energies at plants, pumping, chemical costs, as well as greenhouse gases. So a lot of things that kind of tie back to a lot of the mission and kind of goals, initiatives, or utilities, we kind of hit front and center just based off of the data that they already have or investments that they're making.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about too the just kind of from the utility perspective, what kind of benefits they would get from utilizing stuff like this. And you've already mentioned a couple of them, like in terms of the lead and copper rule about using GIS information and other measurement data to actually find the pipes that you need to replace for lead inventory. Like
Right.
huge, like what a huge lift that's going to be for a lot of utilities to do. So having these systems in place and having these technologies available to shorten that time frame, like you said, is dramatically important. But also in terms of like we had mentioned the HoloLens stuff and being able to do things so remotely, what kind of benefits do those things play in addition to like I guess we can separate it like what does the data role play and then what does like the design engineering role play of like what kinds of benefits do they get from either or?
Yeah. So the on the design engineering, the benefits is more streamlined. So more streamlined initial designs to really overall project schedules are more streamlined because you're able to bring in data and planning using the HoloLens and digital twin types of technologies and do a lot of upfront work much more efficiently. On the data side, it's just it is kind of what the challenge. The challenge is if you look at any all these are public budget reports from utilities, or you look at them, there's line items that say they're spending tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars on data initiatives and data processing. But there's still, if you ask any of them, there's still data silos. There's still only a few sets of eyes that actually look at those data streams. And so then you ask yourself, okay, what can you do to, if we had more people looking at it, if more matching up of that data, what multipliers can you get from that, right? Like what if you are able to have customer service see where there's lead and copper requests and where there's water age challenges, and then having call come in, if you put all those pieces together, you get some new insights and you're able to do some more actions. So that's the exciting part on the data side. And then, yeah, as mentioned, like there's more with the Biden infrastructure bill and kind of the investments, the money that's being provided for lead and copper and for aging infrastructure. There's going to be a need just to be more, I guess, more proactive and I guess more defendable decision making on on what engineers and what utilities come up with, right? So like they're proposing to replace a good amount of pipes at a certain time, they better have a plan around it to back it up, right? It's just to kind of say like, why did you prioritize this versus another part of your system? And
Hmm.
that whole um, the whole socioeconomic aspect of like, okay, are we being fair and equitable how we're planning our infrastructure improvements? And it's all going to be part of that equation, and being transparent and democratizing that data is a big part of that.
Yeah. The thing that you mentioned as well earlier was like the machine learning aspect of that too, and I think that that's kind of like one of the next steps then too, because part of the challenge with the machine learning AI right now is just making sure that people have the data to run through it. So could you talk a little bit about where do you see the future of these technologies going in terms of whether it's HoloLens or machine learning AI, whether it's data understanding and data analytics? Where do you see these types of things going, these digital strategies going, both for utilities and for engineering firms?
Yes. So there's so much to talk. I'll talk. I'll kind of talk to you what's kind of near and dear to my heart. Uh, I really think there's a we're just touching the surface around the digital twin and smart water side of things. So kind of those innovations going around that. Um, and so as we discussed, like the cloud is kind of changing kind of the speed to implement, the affordability of kind of getting at these systems, and the simplicity. And so like I equate a lot to the auto industry, right? They're doing. I think today I was listening to the radio about the largest or the highest grossing vehicle in the U.S., the Ford F-150, right, is now going electric. And so these little changes, these kind of things are starting, and then in so many years it can be ubiquitous. No one's going to care. You go to Home Depot, you have rows and rows of lawn equipment that's all electric, battery powered. Versus if you went there 10 years ago, everything was like the clunky oil and gas, right? And so these changes are happening, and with a digital twin, that landscape and smart water is just it is it's starting to move in that. I think what you'll find, and I think what's going to win is simplicity is going to be king. I think about how with the pandemic and Zoom, right? Zoom wasn't like the only online player, like media, uh, online meeting, place there, but they're the most simple. They beat out go to meet them. They beat out these other players in the market because my dad could use it, and like they're able to get it right. Like the what's neat about it is like simplicity. Utilities still won't have the time for operators and their engineers to spend days on training or going through training manuals. You need a simple tools to get specific jobs done in their goals and niches that they set forth. So if it's lead and copper, if it's reducing overflows on the sewer side, if it's reducing flooding for river agencies, it's all of that. So I'm really excited with that. But like my on the other side is like with great power. I think it was a Spider-Man comes good big great responsibility and then risk, right? There's that cybersecurity, like that whole side of like, okay, now we need to invest and kind of make sure we're being all these different solutions that are being developed in different places are smart with how they're developing it. They're looking at the cybersecurity threats and building accordingly. But I don't want to end in a down note. But there's so much good like good
Yeah.
things going on. It really is an exciting time to be in our industry. I think really um, there's like positive disruption in terms of like really getting some things done to really make change is happening right now. So appreciate you kind of organizing this call. I think it's a good discussion to have.
Totally. And I want to just unpack a couple of the things you mentioned there. The simplicity is key thing I think is really important, and you mentioned the security aspect. In terms of simplicity, I think that you're totally right there. These systems, as powerful as they are, if they add a burden to already stressed and burdened utilities, are they actually going to use them? They have to be so easy to implement, so easy to use, and to be effective. Because otherwise, at some point, optimization is no longer optimal because the time you spent optimizing didn't produce an outcome that was
Right.
optimal enough. So
Yeah.
so at some point you just have to cut the cord and say this is the simplicity, this is the simple answer, and this is how we're going to use it. So I think that you make a really strong point there. I think that's a really critical point for already stressed utilities. And then obviously security is going to be a big thing. I think this is something that even us as WWD, we haven't touched on nearly enough given how much data is being pulled in by utilities these days. It is something that's really critical, and I think after the event in Oldsmar, Florida earlier this year, I
Mm,
think that was like one of the few very public things that we hear about. I think that that's really impressed on utilities, kind of that security issue a lot more, and I think that that's going to drive a lot of conversations, especially this year at like trade shows and virtual events and stuff.
absolutely. Yeah. Totally agree. Yeah. It is the kind of the challenge, but the at the same time the exciting point of like developing tools that are useful but easy to use and secure. I mean, it really comes
Hmm.
down to those basic elements. But yeah,
Yeah, make it
that
easy to use and secure. You make it sound so simple.
yeah, exactly right. Uh,
Well, Raj, thank you so
uh,
much. I appreciate you taking the time today. It's been great to talk to you about all these different systems, a lot of the technology. I can hear the passion that you have, especially for digital twin, which is also very cool. Maybe we can touch on that in a separate video altogether because
sure.
I know there's a lot just with that we could talk about. But for everyone who is watching or listening, you can check out the article that Raj penned in the description below, and you can get some more information there. But thank you again, Raj. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate you having us here. So thanks.